Welcome back to She Reaches, the podcast from SSPI Wise, where we spotlight the incredible women shaping the future of the space industry. SSPI Wise is a global initiative of the Space and Satellite Professionals International, dedicated to elevating and empowering those who identify as women within the industry. I'm your host, Tanveer Pujara, and today I'm thrilled to be speaking with Lee Steinke, a trailblazer whose work is helping to build the foundations of our future in space. Lee is the Chief Operating Officer of CisLunar Industries, a company that is building scalable, intelligent hardware that transforms power to run space. They envision a thriving economy in space where energy is harnessed and reshaped to build an abundant, resilient future. Over her career, Lee has worked with some of the most influential organizations in space and defense, including NASA and the US Space Force. With an MBA from Wharton, a master's in science from Yale, and a bachelor's from UNC Chapel Hill, Lee brings a fantastic mix of scientific expertise and business leadership to her role. Welcome, Lee. Thank you so much for joining the She Reaches podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing very well. Excited to be talking with you today.
Fantastic. We're excited to have you. Let's get straight into it. I'd like to first ask you, how did you get into the space industry?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. I had a career in another industry for 20 years, was enjoying that work, loved what I did and the colleagues that I had. And I started to see signs of disruption from the space industry. So some of the same things that I was experiencing in my other industry back in the mid 2000s, so 2005, 2008, some of those stirrings of technology-driven disruption were sort of ringing in the space industry. And I was really intrigued by that. And I had had such a wonderful experience helping to drive disruption in this other industry that I really became interested in getting involved in space. And so I actually started out in the nonprofit side. So I got my foot in the door. I was a scientist, I'm a scientist, an executive in the other industry, and just started volunteering. And then shortly after, consulting with some of those nonprofits, doing some online interviews like this, and getting to know people, learning the industry. And then in 2022, I became the Chief Operating Officer of CisLunar Industries.
Wow. Okay. So the other industry that you talk about, that's the energy industry. Is that correct? So that's your sort of background?
Yes.
Okay.
Energy, natural resources, really exciting business with a similar science and engineering culture. And so there's a lot of parallels between the two industries.
Mm-hmm. Which one do you prefer?
You know, it's funny. I've moved around a lot as both as a child and as an adult. And I've always been happy everywhere I've been. I find the things to be curious about, pursuits and challenges to overcome. And the same is true with work. So I tend to, other than my favorite number, which we discussed in the warm up, I tend not to, try to elevate and rank. Instead, I try to find the common threads among different options in any scenario.
That's a very diplomatic answer. I love it. Nice. Okay, so you moved to so you joined CisLunar about 3 years ago.
Yes.
What was it that attracted you about this company? What was the mission? Was it the mission, or their vision? What was it?
Yeah. So really, in a lot of ways, it was the team, the talent on the team, the potential for the company. We were just, we had gotten our first few contracts. And it was, an exciting time of growth. And I saw potential to take on some challenges that the company hadn't yet tried. And if we had more resources and more insights, we could really move. And that's been what's happened. So combining, what I know and had done, the experience that I had, with the rest of the team and their expertise, deep expertise, it was really exciting to join forces and move ahead.
Mm-hmm. And what was the sort of what's the sort of foundation of what CisLunar does for people who are not familiar with it? Could you explain what's the technology that you're working on? And that kind of thing?
Yes. So we transform power to run space. Everything in space runs on electricity, and every watt of that electricity has to be transformed in order to be the right form to run the different payloads, right? To run your propulsion, to run your sensors, your cameras, anything that you want to do on a spacecraft is takes different power levels, different voltage, different current, and so there's this sort of pass through that has to be done to take the power from the solar panels or from nuclear or battery and change that shape for those applications. And so we were able to find differentiation there, both in terms of the quality of what we produce and the power level that we produce. So we're able to do higher power things that are the future of space. And then we also have expertise in high-speed manufacturing outside of the space industry. And the space industry is built on bespoke, custom, specialized, super fancy hardware and software that can't be mass produced. And so we're working to a model where we can create modular, adaptable systems where we can push customization out into, minimize the amount that has to be customized for different applications and different customers, and pull those into something that can be mass manufactured for the future of proliferated satellites.
Right. Wow. Okay. So there's a big mission there. And there's a lot that's happened in the last, I think it's quite a young company, isn't it? I think it launched in 2017.
That's correct.
Quite young. Yes. Yeah, and it's obviously achieved quite a lot as well. When I was just sort of researching about CisLunar, I think you did your first mission, was it last year?
In 2024.
Yeah. How was that? Well, it must have been incredible, from concept and from the lab to then, in space.
That was an incredible experience. So, the team had put in so many years of challenge and production. And to be able to take the team, we took the whole team to Florida for this launch. We had produced a power supply that powered the first automated electron beam welding application in space. So the first robotic autonomous welding. And so it launched, it was in space for 2 minutes, and then it came down with the first stage of a Falcon 9. And that mission was a partnership with Think Orbital. They purchased our power converter to run their hardware. And it was a successful mission. And it was so exciting and gratifying to be there and hear the rocket and see the trail and know that our mission, what we had built with our hands, was going to space.
Yeah, it's amazing. It sort of solidifies all that hard work, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a wonderful feeling. And we think a lot about firsts because those are all buying down risk to that big vision that has so many parts and pieces and so many things to accomplish. And so when you're able to do a first and you buy down a certain type of risk with that first, it's such a good feeling, but it's also, one piece of that, one step in that longer path.
Yeah, 100%. And then I guess this moment was, obviously it was the first. Since then, how did that moment, transform the company?
Yeah. So that was a verification. We had recently done a pivot, and it was the first thing that we'd built for that pivot. We originally were founded to transform materials in space. So we've built a space foundry. We continue on some research and development in that area to transform metals that are already in space into useful materials. So the idea of transformation is very core to our company. It turns out that the hardware, the power supply that we built and the software that we wrote to run it were differentiated and useful for all these other applications that we hadn't thought about. We had just built it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we were able to apply that. And this was the first sort of standalone power project that we had done, our first customer.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we have many, a number of different customers, both commercial, and we've also been able to win government contracts working on this power technology. So really have knocked down a lot of milestones and making progress on our pivots. That was sort of the first step there.
Amazing. And are there other competitors that are doing sort of similar things that you're doing, or you want to like the only ones?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of our biggest areas of competition is companies that want to make their own, they think of the power supply as an afterthought. And so they're building something, they're building a payload, and they say, well, we'll just build the power supply for that, especially in electric propulsion. And they can do that, and they're working on it. But often what we hear from them is, gosh, this is harder than we thought. We can do it, but maybe it's not the best way. Maybe it takes up a little too much space. Maybe it takes up too much mass. Maybe it creates too much heat. And we have to put more radiators on the spacecraft to get rid of that heat. And so, if you had a solution that where we could plug that into our system, we would probably buy that off the shelf right now. And so that area of competition is really interesting when somebody is willing to sort of go from being vertically integrated to buying components. And that's really, I think, a trend in the industry. There are, of course, other companies that supply these. And we just did a partnership with another startup, we did an MOU with another startup recently to join forces so that either of us had a different strength in any area. We could call the other and say, hey, let's work together on this program and deliver to the customer faster. Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, join forces, it makes your product stronger, doesn't it? So that's definitely a great idea. Okay, so so that's the company, but then as you as a chief operating officer, what is it? How do you balance, all these multiple things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis? I'm sure you're like turning so many plates at the same time. How do you balance that and then also have a life as well?
Yeah, that's funny. I have a video from Space Gala in 2022 of me. They actually brought plates and the stick that you can spin them on, and they taught us how to spin the plates. And so I have a video of me at a space event spinning actual plates, and I always think of that when I try to think of the things that we're juggling as a team. But there's this idea of balance, right? So there are times where you need to be out there communicating, networking, finding customers, talking to customers, understanding their needs, looking for partners. And so there's that outward-facing work, talking about your mission and vision, that outward-facing work. Then there are the times when you do the deep work, right? The technical work, the thinking about how are we going to structure something? How are we going to solve a problem within the company? Outside the company, how are we going to build going forward, right? But then there's also this third piece, and that's just doing the tedious, boring, here's what we have to do today, checklists, right? Getting all those things done. And so being able to find the right residence time in each of those baskets, those three baskets, is a challenge that if you don't keep it in mind and thinking about it, you will neglect one of those. And so I try to make sure that I'm thinking about those three things. At home, I have a family. I have a daughter who just went off to college.
Exciting.
And, yes. And our son is a sophomore in high school. And so still very much involved in their lives. My husband and I, we volunteer. We try to participate in what they're doing along the way. And that is very important to me, and something that you have to find balance with as well.
Yeah, 100%. And do you have your kids sort of are they following your footsteps? Are they interested in the space industry, or like you don't want to stand a mile from it?
Yeah, no, I joined the industry not too long ago. And in many ways, their interests were already established.
Yeah.
My daughter's studying marine biology and film. She certainly has an interest in science the way that I do, and my husband does. And we'll be pursuing that. But I think that what has stood out for her is the adaptability that I demonstrated during a key part of both of their lives in a career transition, right? And I think that what I see in them is that understanding that you can take on new challenges and you can be bold in that way. You don't have to be constrained by what you've already tried or what you've already done. And in that way, I think that what I've done carries on in my family.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
So in your role as a leader of this company, what have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced as a leader? I think I saw that your founders were 2 males. So as a woman as well and a leader, how has that maybe helped, or maybe it's been a challenge? And how have you managed to navigate that?
Yeah. My colleagues, first of all, are very good people. I respect and admire them. We work together on problems in a rational, thoughtful, honest, and kind way. They're intellectually honest. Defensiveness does not typically come into our challenging discussions. We disagree all the time on all kinds of things. And we're able to do that in a respectful way. I have felt engaged and respected without any regard to my gender over the course of my experience at CisLunar Industries. That being said, we can't pretend that there's no fact that there are fewer women on boards in Fortune 500 companies than, I heard a funny statistic, fewer women on boards in the Fortune 500 than men named John.
Wow. That's crazy.
So, whether it's Fortune 500, Fortune 5000, I'm not sure, or Fortune 1000, I'm not sure. But somebody did that study, and it was.
That's very funny,
but
right. Shocking.
Yeah. And so, certainly you run into mostly. You can sometimes recognize in people when they are approaching you in a different light. And sometimes that works and you adjust your conversation. And other times it just means that you move on to the next conversation and the next program. But sort of going backwards from there, you talked about challenges for women in the industry, and I kind of want to go back in time to girlhood, right? And an experience that I had recently. My son used to be into trains, and so I still will go to a train layout and just enjoy it for myself, based on the memories that I have of his young childhood interest in trains. And I was at a show in a recent layout, and it was at a home. And this beautiful train layout, all the trappings, and people running around, and children running around, grown-ups running around. And a little girl came in, and it was a member of the family that of the person who lived there. And she came running in, and she was about maybe 7 or 8 years old. And she looked at the train, and she said, "Oh, Grandpa, what does this do, this switch?" And she was holding on to a switch. And I immediately zoned in because I was like, oh boy, she's asked a question and he's going to explain. I can't wait to see how he explains this to her. And maybe we'll get to see under the table where the electronics are. And, I'm really excited to see how he responds to this question. And he said, "Oh, that turns on the thing." And then he moved on to some other folks. And at the same time, there were some boys around the table who were receiving deep explanations of different things around the table. And so the little girl just flipped the switch a few times and ran off, and I never saw her come into where the train was again. And I have no doubt that that grandfather loves his granddaughter, right? And so this was not an evil plan to to stop an area of curiosity or interest. But I want to emphasize that there is a compounding effect for when we ignore the curiosity of little girls. And she not only doesn't learn about that thing, but she doesn't get that opportunity to be in the conversation, to have some spark of inspiration, to see a deeper truth. And so there's a pattern that then is costly over time. And so, I would encourage anyone listening to give the long answer to a little girl who asks a question.
Yeah, definitely. Because I guess she's just going to grow up thinking that it's insignificant. She doesn't need to know about that. It's not important for her, right?
Yeah.
That's a really, really stark example, I guess, of what the situation is even now. I mean, things are getting better in the space industry. I love to see, women at the top, women founders, people like yourself. But there is we can't ignore the fact that still exists.
Yeah, and I think this industry in particular is it's a challenging industry. The work is hard, regardless of the dynamics of culture. The work is already hard. Mm-hmm. And so stacking that on, you're already going to have people who are strong and interested in doing hard things. And so the dynamics of the industry are something that you can continue to absorb along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess looking back, for you then over the years of your you've worked in different sectors and different industries, and then now the space industry. What has been the toughest lesson that you think you've learned in your career so far?
Well, I've certainly had my share of failures. The hardest fought lesson, I think, I grew up as somebody who thought that you solved a problem, you identified a problem, and then you solved it, and then that was done. You were finished with that, and then you went to the next problem. You solved that, and eventually you would solve all the problems. And I think it was Lord Kelvin who was like, "Well, we've solved all the problems in science. We don't need it." Right? I kind of, as a young person, I kind of that's how I thought and how I approached the world. And I think one of the hardest lessons that took me the early in my career was that a lot of a career is solving the same problems over and over again, right? In different ways, with new circumstances, new technologies, new people, new ideas, right? And so you're often recycling these problems. And that's why it's so important to have new blood in a company, right? New people, new relationships that you build, so you can tackle these problems head on. But that's and maintaining the energy to solve those problems over and over again is a hard lesson too.
Yeah. But I guess there is something within you that inspires you, to keep going and to motivate you. So what is that? What is the motivation for you?
Oh, I'm a very curious person, and I'm very interested in creativity, and so finding a route around a problem. A silly example is we were. This was from a number of years ago. We were struggling with screen resolution on, struggling to have the right resolution of a screen image of some data and some graphical data and information in order to convey that to the right audience. And my staff was coming in. I said, we need to have this better thing. And they came, well, that can't be done. We can't do it that way. We can't accomplish that. And I said, well, does the source data have this higher resolution? Yeah, yes, it does. Well, then we can find a way to show that, right? There is a way. How do we find that way? And so we sort of walked through that process, and how are we going from the final product to the final product from the source data that has the resolution that we need, and how do we? And so it ended up we just had to go, a different route than what the established route was for capturing those images. And a lot of times that's how I solve problems. There's a great scene in the movie Moneyball where the manager played by I don't even know the title of the position, but Brad Pitt's character is negotiating with the manager of the team, and they disagree on something, and their jobs are defined in a particular way, and they have different responsibilities and different authority over different things. And Brad Pitt wants to change what this guy's doing on something he has authority over. And so instead, he goes around and he takes away some options, right? He gets rid of a player, which is his authority, that forces the options that this person has. And so it's that same kind of problem solving of, if you can't solve the problem directly head on, the way to do it is to use creativity and go around that problem. Yeah. So, the long and the short is I'm very passionate about the creative aspects of finding those avenues, whether it has to do with technical problems and asking interesting questions, or helping people understand, how to work together.
Great. Nice. So I'd like to ask about no, it's perfect. I'd like to ask about the vision in the future, about what you think the space industry is going to, be or adapt to in the next decade. What are you most looking forward to, and what do you think, or what are your predictions about what's going to happen in the next 10 years?
Yeah. That is a really interesting question. I have had the privilege of working with the Space Force on space futures, so strategic foresight. So trying to look at future scenarios and understanding the role of the Space Force and what they should be responsible for undertaking, starting now to be prepared for the future. And what some of the things I learned from that work is that you cannot predict the future. Right. Mm-hmm. And the idea is to understand sort of a cone of possibilities, like given where we are today and the certain forces that we see in play, and then anticipating inflection points, identifying, what could be a turning point. Is it Starship? Was it Falcon 9? Is it developments in human life support? Mm-hmm. Is it developments in robotics? What are the key transformative moments that then open that cone? So rather than predicting the future, I try to talk about how we prepare for it. I do think there will be significant growth. I think that the inflection points that we've seen are going to continue to tip over. But things can disrupt that. Right? Situations on Earth, economies on Earth can put a stop to that quite quickly. Mm-hmm. And we can revert, as we've seen multiple iterations in the space industry before, or in space activity before, right? Mm-hmm. We've had these areas of great excitement followed by, very limited activity and development, and forgetting a lot of what we developed. So given what I'd like to see, which is understanding how to use space to benefit life on Earth, and to find ways to solve problems and find resources and use them in responsible ways. Those are all things that I hope we will continue on a trajectory to do without doing too much harm.
That's always the main goal.
Industrial activity always has a cost, and so it's that balancing cost and benefit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in terms of advice that you would have for, the next generation of women or even young ethnic minorities as well, trying to get those ethnic minorities, women into the space industry, what advice do you have for those people?
Yeah. I think I thought about this question. I enjoyed the responses of some of your prior guests, really inspired by their podcasts, and encourage viewers to go back and watch all of the episodes. It's a difficult question because there are so many different ways that different challenges that individual people have and different strengths. As you encounter the different situations in your career, you want to be adapting to the reality that you're facing in that moment, right? Are you on a team that is giving you challenges, isn't giving you the opportunities because you're in that situation, right? How do you adapt to that, right? How are you going to solve that problem? Are you going to find a new opportunity? Are you going to stand up for yourself in a different way? Are you going to present yourself in a different way, or your data in a different way, so that you might find a way to have more influence over the process? Are you going to ask questions about why, right? So that you can maybe open someone's eyes to the fact that you're not getting that exposure. So there are, all kinds of situations that are going to come at you, and learning to ask questions, analyze those situations, and try to sort of strategically position yourself the way a general would, right? The way that someone doing strategic work of different kinds would do.
Nice. Great. So I have a final question, which I like to ask all my guests. Very similar to the advice question, but it's more a very short, succinct message. And that is, if you could put one message in a capsule for the next generation of women in space, what would it say?
Do. Just do.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Lee. It's been fascinating hearing your story and hearing your journey into the space industry. It's been great having you. And we'd hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you so much, Tanveer. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Lee.